Thank you for tuning in to episode 1 of this season's Best Ball live stream hosted on Underdog Fantasy. If you're watching this right now on Twitter, be sure to hop over to the YouTube channel so we can see all of your comments there. That's youtube.com/footballguysfantasy. Today, I'm joined for the first time, Pete. I feel like this is long overdue that you and I are finally doing a show together here. But joined by Pete Overzet. You can find him. He's a part of the ship chasing crew. He does the Best Ball Brunch on his YouTube channel. He's also with MB Fantasy Life. Really busy guy. What did I miss here, Pete? Where else can people find you?
Well, I do want to set the record straight. It's a noticeable or an important distinction. It's Best Ball Breakfast. There was an actual porn parody made with my show in mind called Best Ball Brunch. So when people hear Best Ball Brunch that know me, they are going to think of the porn parody. So I just want to make sure we're separating those two.
And that's exactly where my mind is, because I watch that way more often than I watch your show. So Best Ball Brunch, that's what I was thinking of. No, good stuff there. So, Pete, you kind of look at yourself as a thought leader, I think I could say, in the best ball space. A little bit of an engagement farmer as well. What else am I missing here talking about what you do in this space?
Oh, I mean, if I am nothing compared to you, I'm just a mere, I have a little bit of crops, but no, I am in the presence of a true engagement farmer. Yeah, no, I started streaming my drafts a while ago, way back even before Underdog had officially launched. There was the period where they were draft, FanDuel bought them, and they were basically relaunching as Underdog during that interim. Drafters had been going on, but started really early drafting on Underdog, and then have just loved how the space has evolved from kind of a game theory standpoint, tournament standpoint. Obviously, the prize pools, we're about to draft a team where we can win 1.5 million, and then really trying to think through what are the ways we can best position ourselves to draft. Because I know something you do a lot of 12-person individual leagues with people who are just trying to get their feet wet. And the strategy in one of those is wildly different than the things we're going to be doing in this draft. And that might seem weird to people, but trying to beat 11 people versus 670,000 plus people require two different sets of mindsets.
And we talk about that a lot. We lean on underdog ADP a lot when we're kind of discussing where players are getting drafted. And we talk about that. Those guys that are really volatile, Devon Achane right now going in round 2, I think he is a great pick in best ball in round 2. But if I'm drafting against 11 of my buddies in my home league, I'm probably not thinking about taking Achane until round 3 or 4, but you got to swing for that high end range of outcomes. So let's go ahead and jump in here. I'm sure we'll have some people watching the stream who are looking to join as well. How many of these BBM drafts have you done so far, Pete? I've got 10 under my belt. This will be number 11 for me.
Yeah, I believe we were in a draft the other day. I think I was streaming or I was recording something and I noticed you were in our draft. I think I've done 16 or 17.
Right.
It's tough, right? Because you want to scratch the itch. You want to take advantage of some of these early ADPs that are broken, that are going to change.
We don't even
we're going to get
Jaden
Daniels. We're going to get Jaden Daniels at a way cheaper price than people who draft in August, but there's also kind of downsides to drafting this early as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the thumbnail that we used, but Jaden Daniels has been an auto smash for me. I mean, it is unbelievable where he's getting drafted right now. We just did our early rankings with Alfredo Brown and I. We were talking about this. We both have Jaden Daniels inside our top 10. And I believe right now, unless it's changed, last I saw he was getting drafted as QB 14, I believe.
Yeah. His ADP has moved a
QB
little bit.
13, so he's moving up, and he was QB 16 a couple of weeks ago. So people are getting a little bit savvy to it, but still getting him at quite a discount.
Yeah, he's my most drafted quarterback. I just pulled it up. I have him on almost 40% of my draft. So I've been hammering him too. I mean, to me, it's just like such an obvious thing in that it's not even saying like I'm so bullish on Jaden Daniels. I mean, I am, but it's more just saying I know he's going to be way more expensive by August.
Right.
People were drafting Anthony Richardson in the 7th round. It's a really similar thesis to the Anthony Richardson stuff as far as what we're going to get from his ability on the ground. So yeah, I'm going to continue drafting him a ton now. And maybe I take my feet off the gas when he gets into the 7th, 8th round. But yeah, he's just an awesome price right now.
And I think Caleb Williams is another guy. We're looking at kind of the two rookies that went 1 and 2 right now. I was just talking about this in a best ball group chat that I'm a part of, where it seems like Caleb Williams is another guy who is at a severe discount right now. We see all 3 wide receivers getting steamed up in ADP. I mean, people are expecting big things from this Bears pass attack, but Caleb Williams is the guy that seems like the best discount right now in Chicago. Obviously Jaden Daniels has a range of outcomes where he can rush for 1,000+ yards. Caleb Williams doesn't have that, but it's not crazy to think that he can rush for 500, 600, 700 yards in his rookie season.
And I think that's really what it boils down to, right? The rushing, because if you see the rushing upside, you could say like he's arbitrage CJ Stroud, right? Where you're getting a quarterback with 3 legitimate weapons, give us some rushing juice. Holy cow, he could be a 5th, 6th round value. Or you could flip it and say, if Caleb Williams doesn't rush at all, why not just wait a couple rounds later, grab another former 101 pick, Trevor Lawrence, who's really underpriced, grab a guy like Justin Herbert, who we know is good. He's done it in the NFL. So I think that's the range there. I kind of think he's properly priced, but I certainly see room for upside.
Now we're still waiting for this to fill. Have you found a spot yet? I know last year I loved drafting at the end of the first round. And it ended up being one of the best starts that you can get in best ball drafts. But when I was able to get CeeDee Lamb at the end of the first and then Amon St. Brown at the beginning of the second, that seemed like an ideal start. This year, in the drafts that I've done, I seem to be favoring the early picks. You know, I want to get McCaffrey, Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Chase, one of those 4. But more than anything, it seems like if you're drafting late, that 3-4 turn this year is when there's a huge, huge fall off. So do you have a preferred draft spot that you like to draft from this year?
Yeah, I'm with you. I even think the 1-2 turn, that early second, is even tougher than the 3-4 turn, in that I kind of view after, I'm looking at it here, like once Garrett Wilson and Jahmyr Gibbs come off the board, I think it's a really, really flat, long tier. Like, I like Marvin Harrison. I like Drake London. I think JT is pretty exciting. But I can also make cases for Jalen Waddle, for Mike Evans, for Deebo Samuel. Like, to me, it's a really long tier. And we're just kind of having to thrust some of these guys up to the early second by necessity. Some guy has to go there. So to me, that makes it tough, because I also see a tier break after kind of like Amon-Ra, Bijan, and Breece Hall, maybe around like 1-8, 1-9. I like Puka, I like AJ Brown, I like Garrett Wilson, but it's a little tier break there. So I like having one of those top 7 picks. Then you let someone else take maybe the overvalued early second guys, and then maybe you capture the end of that tier in mid round 3. Like, I can get Jalen Waddle and Malik Neighbors there sometimes. That feels really good. So I think I like the middle, early middle.
And if I recall, that draft that you and I were in together, we were both going after Dolphins players. I got Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. You had Devon Achane, and there was a point where we were picking just a couple spots away from each other, and I was terrified you were going to snipe me on Tua, but I was lucky enough. Tua fell about a round below ADP, and I was able to complete that big Miami stack. Well, here we are sitting at 3rd overall. This is what I said. I like this. I mean, we're getting one of Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, or Tyreek Hill. I think those are probably the 3 safest guys. I'll lump Jamar Chase in there as well as kind of a little mini tier there.
Yeah.
Not a little bit right here. I'm not sure what's going on.
A little tweakage there. Have you noticed? I've been seeing CeeDee Lamb, like, it feels in maybe 1 out of every 2 or 3 of my drafts, CeeDee Lamb goes ahead of Christian McCaffrey, which I always find a little interesting.
Yeah, we've there was a pretty big fade from a lot of people on Christian McCaffrey last year, and now he's getting up there in age. But ever since he's joined San Francisco, I mean, he's just been a 20-point per game machine, scoring a touchdown basically every single week. Do you have a strong take between Tyreek Hill or Jamar Chase? I'm going Tyreek pretty easily here. What do you think, though?
I don't have strong takes. Normally in this first 6 or 7 picks, I just draft it by ADP. Basically, my thought being, I want exposure to all of these guys.
Right.
If you always take Jamar Chase over Tyreek Hill at 1-3, it means you are rarely going to have Tyreek Hill. You could end up with around 20% Jamar Chase and 0% Tyreek Hill. That's fine if that's the stand you want to make. I want to have exposure to both of those, so I'll just draft it at ADP, and I'll make my stands later in a draft.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the right way, and I knew you were going to answer that way, but I wanted to kind of ask it because I think it's an important conversation. I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of beginners make in best ball, is taking really hard stands early on. If you're going to be drafting volume, if you're doing more than just a handful of drafts, I think it makes sense to adhere pretty closely to ADP. I see we got a lot of badges in this chat. Super shorty here. Our friend Steph is in this draft, so let's see who she goes with here. And again, it's looking pretty chalky. We expect to see that with a lot of badges in the draft. A lot of people just drafting off of ADP here. So I know you said that 2-3 turn is when things get a little bit shaky. Is there anybody specific that you really hope falls to you at that 2-3 turn?
At the 2-3 turn, so that's, we're looking at what, like picks 35, 36 in that range. If you can get a faller like Devontae Smith. Oh, sorry, what?
Pick 22. We're looking at
22 at the
22 and 27 is what we have coming up with the next ones.
Sorry, yeah, I was thinking 3-4 there. I think there's generally a decent amount of good options here. Chris Olave has been a guy I've been selecting a lot, who, again, I think you could make the case could be up there with Drake
Drake
London,
London.
with those
That's exactly
guys.
what I was
Yeah.
thinking. Yeah.
And it's not even that I'm like, oh, Drake London's overpriced. It goes back to this thing. Some player has to go there. If Chris Olave was going there and Drake London was going at the end of the second, we'd be saying the same thing in the inverse. We'd be like, Chris Olave is overrated and Drake London's underrated. So he's just a guy I gravitate to. One thing I've been doing that maybe makes the decisions easier for me at the 2-3 turn, I really prefer Tank Dell cost adjusted to Nico in Diggs.
Yep.
It's a spot where I think there's a lot of ambiguity. I thought Tank Dell was really, really good. And so how do I want to play that? I want to be overweight the cheapest guy of the bunch. So because of that, I find myself taking Debo, taking Olave, and then just grabbing Tank Dell in the fourth instead.
Yeah, and Tank Dell, we saw right before his injury where he was, I don't know if you could say taking over as the wide receiver one, but it was pretty much a 50-50 split if you look at any metric, targets, yardage, first reads, all of that. Nico and Tank Dell were kind of playing this 1A, 1B. Now we have to kind of prognosticate what things are going to look like with Stephon Diggs, which really, two's a company, three's a crowd. It's going to be kind of tough to anticipate how this is going to shake out in Houston. But what we saw from CJ Stroud last year, over 4,500 yards, he could easily take that step forward this year, be a 5,000 plus yard passer. And if that's the case, all three of these wide receivers could end up paying off at ADP. I'm with you on Tank Dell, though. And a guy that we mentioned before the draft even kicked off, Devon Achane. For me, he's a guy that I am targeting pretty aggressively at the end of the second round, and he goes off the board right there, so we're not going to get him. Kyren Williams, obviously, we've got the concern with Blake Corum, how things are going to get split there. I'm not too concerned. I think that that's all baked into his ADP at this point. But who's the guy that jumps out to you here? We've already got Tyreek Hill, Kyren Williams, Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle. Who do you want to take here?
Because if I think through the 2v2s, I think we're going to really like the wide receiver we get at 3-3. I don't mind taking Kyren Williams here. I've done this with Jonathan Taylor. I thought Kyren Williams was overpriced pre-draft. Now that the price is more kind of baking in that there might be a little bit of a touch squeeze, it's a more palatable to me. And just knowing, look at these wide receivers, these next six. I'm okay with any of those that we get at 3-3. Whereas we know there's no running backs we're probably going to like at this pick. So I kind of just want to play the 2v2 there and get an anchor running back in the late second.
And just thinking of Sean McVay's philosophy, I don't think there's going to be a split between Kyren Williams and Blake Corum. If we see anything, we'll see some games where maybe Blake Corum has a huge workload that's kind of surprising and unexpected, but he always kind of leans on one running back. Rarely do we see a split. So I think especially in best ball, such a cliche here, but Kyren Williams is the type of guy you want to have because he's still going to have these huge spike weeks where he's getting an 80-90% workload. So I'm okay with that pick as well. If he was going at the 1-2 turn, I'd probably be a little bit more out on Kyren, but now with Corum there and the concerns, him getting pushed down all the way to the end of the second round, I'm A-okay with that pick. And then we talked about it. All of these guys are pretty flat here. Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle, Malik Neighbors. I really like Malik Neighbors here. Do you think it's too much of a reach, though? Neighbors and Waddle are the two guys that I prefer over Diggs, but who do you lean towards here?
I'm right there with you. It sounds like we're in lockstep because I like Waddle, Neighbors. I slightly prefer Waddle. I do Waddle, then Neighbors, then Diggs would be how I would personally rank it, but no argument with either of those guys.
We've already got Tyreek, if you recall. So this sets us up for the big Miami stack. We're going to go ahead and throw Tua in the queue right now just so we don't forget. That leads me to the next question, I guess. We're talking a little bit about game theory and kind of how we play this a little bit. When you already have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you'd say it's pretty much necessary to get Tua, correct? Or am I overstating it a little bit there?
So a couple things. Definitely, just in a vacuum, Tua now is way more valuable to our team than any other team in this contest or in this self-contained league. One thing, though, is we know stacking is important no matter what. Mike Leone did an incredible best ball manifesto deep dive where he was looking at how you increase your chances in these large field tournaments. And ideally, if you do have three quarterbacks, all three quarterbacks are stacked. My kind of way that I like to talk it out is that I don't think stacking has to begin or end with the quarterback. We could still get three quarterbacks in here that aren't Dolphins and stack each of those three quarterbacks up and still essentially have a fourth stack with the Dolphins. And so that's why it's also freeing too, because you don't tilt as much. You don't have to reach to get him. If someone takes Tua, guess what? We're going to stack up our other quarterbacks as well and get the benefit of this stack without the quarterback. And the reason that works is because quarterback scoring is the most replaceable of all the scoring. Like
Right.
Tua is a solid quarterback, but he's going to give us 21, 22 points per game. Other quarterbacks, we can, replace that later in the draft. And so while I do think we should make Tua a target, I don't think we have to force it. And if we get sniped, guess what? We're just going to build out other stacks while still reaping the correlation benefits of being in on the Dolphins.
So just riffing on this a little bit more, let me go ahead and pull up what our future picks would be here. His ADP right now is about 112. The
Yep.
picks that we have, 99, 118. So what we're expecting is that Tua probably goes around the 9-10 turn. Are you willing to reach for him at 99, or are you hoping that because we've already secured both Dolphins that he's going to fall to us at 118?
Yeah, I would personally never take him at 99. Another reason why, and this is unique to the pocket passers that don't run a ton. And once you start doing a bunch of drafts, you'll notice this. I mean, we did a ship chasing draft yesterday. We took Aaron Rodgers. We had Garrett Wilson. We took Aaron Rodgers at pick 203. 50 picks
Ooh.
past ADP because the Mike Williams drafter already had another quarterback. We had Garrett Wilson. No one else wanted to take
Yep.
Rodgers without a thing. So when you've cornered the market on the premium stack partners like we have, the room is going to not want Tua. I mean, think about the narratives around Tua. Can't
Right.
win out in the cold, can't do this, doesn't run. Who wants him other than the Tyreek and Waddle drafters? So to me, that gives us a green light to really push it. Obviously, you don't necessarily want to push it as much as we did with Aaron Rodgers. We already had two quarterbacks. And then we're like,
Right.
fine, we'll take him as our third quarterback. But it is kind of a way where you can get the stack cheaper and actually get better prices than you would other intuitively think.
Yeah, and I think the only person you'd really have to worry about is the man here who took Devon Achane at 19. He'll be picking a little bit before us at 115, so he might want that quarterback running back stack, which people are getting a little bit more open to wanting to stack nowadays. So maybe Tua goes at 115. Hopefully he falls to us at 118. But here we are up in just a couple picks. Just a reminder, so far we've got Kyron Williams, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. I am loving T. Higgins, but he goes off the board here. So who jumps out to you as somebody that you're looking to draft here? Lamar Jackson, Trey McBride, Isaiah Pacheco, CJ Stroud, Dalton Kincaid, or do we work down to these veteran receivers, Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen?
So I'm a big proponent of elite tight end this year, and Trey McBride is going to be a big part of that for me. So I click him a lot here at ADP. If you did feel strongly about one of those veteran wide receivers and then say like, hey, let's try to get Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, I also don't mind that because I want to have access to all of these kind of what I consider cheaply priced elite tight ends. But yeah, I really like Trey McBride.
Yeah, complete agreement there. And you might be getting him at a bit of a discount right now. I mean, before Marvin Harrison was drafted by the Cardinals, Alfredo and I were talking about Trey McBride being a top 2 tight end this year. And now he's sliding a little bit because of concerns about Marvin Harrison, but they're going to be operating in completely different parts of the field. So I'm not concerned here. Amari Cooper is the guy that jumps out to me here. I really do like Amari Cooper, but is there somebody else that piques your interest? Christian Kirk is another guy who's probably getting pushed down.
I normally take Kirk over Amari, but I'm not going to fight you on Amari if you strongly prefer him.
This is your show, Pete. So we're going to go ahead and take Christian Kirk
your
here.
show. But yeah.
I like Christian Kirk, and I've liked him for years. And Alfredo Brown and I, just a couple of days ago, we got in a very heated debate because we were about 2 positional spots off on our ranking for Christian Kirk, and you know how heated that can get. I'm a fan of Christian Kirk. I like what he does, but I hate to say the too many mouths to feed, but Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram operating in similar parts of the field. I think Brian Thomas is more suited for the role that we saw Calvin Ridley playing last year. So I expect him to be a pretty big part of that offense as well. I think drafting Christian Kirk where he's going right now, I mean, this is a guy, if you look end of season finishes, yeah, he was wide receiver 11 last year, but last year or 2 years ago, but if you look 2 years ago, and this most recent season, he was about the per game, like a back end wide receiver 2, which I guess considering we're drafting him as our wide receiver 3, it's not terrible production. But sell me on Christian Kirk a little bit. I want to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, Christian Kirk has just been consistently good and efficient through multiple different offenses, multiple different quarterback schemes, even dating back to Arizona when Cliff Kingsbury didn't know how to use him properly in the horizontal raid. And he has been that guy last year that made Calvin Ridley overvalued. He was the one that was consistently earning targets. And also, it goes down to like there is an actual lack of creativity with this Jacksonville offense. And it was a concern for Calvin Ridley last year. I was down on Calvin Ridley, and I think I was right for the wrong reasons.
Same,
Like I thought,
same.
like
Yes,
I was right because they didn't actually scheme him the ball and get him easy looks. They were just marooning him on the sideline and being like,
right.
make a play. Um,
I thought
and
he was just
Christian,
washed and old and 2 years out of football,
yeah,
and that's why I didn't want him. And it turns out they just grossly misutilized his skill set.
100%. And so, Christian Kirk benefits from playing in the slot a little bit more, moving around like the Evan Ingram thing. And so I feel more confident about the offense running through those guys. Brian Thomas is going to be kind of a souped up version of what they were asking Calvin Ridley to do, really athletic, win down the sideline. So, yeah, the other thing too, from more of a game theory standpoint, I do like to think through stacking options. And I
Mhm.
really don't like Deshaun Watson for a lot of reasons. I also just have not seen him be a good football player since Houston. And, if I am breaking ties in favor of Amari versus Christian Kirk, like both those quarterbacks are appropriately priced, but Trevor Lawrence is another one of those guys that will fall in drafts. And I find him to be at a really nice price point. And if we are going to go with, say, like a 3 quarterback build, like a Tua, Lawrence, whatever we end up doing, Lawrence is a guy I like having as a backdoor kind of stack option here.
So I know you said you like elite tight end this year. How do
Mm.
you feel about double elite tight end? And I don't know if Evan Ingram really falls into that bucket, but we've already got Trey McBride. Now that we have Christian Kirk, would you be looking at picks 70, 75 coming up here in a little bit? Would you think about maybe adding Evan Ingram to this build, or is that just way too heavy on tight ends?
No, I'm okay with double elite tight end. I personally have a slight tier break from George Kittle to Evan Ingram, but
Right,
I would say that's mitigated by us already having Christian Kirk. We want to build
right,
out a bet on the Jags. The way I've been kind of playing elite tight end is if I think the tight end is the best pick on the board, like I don't care. Like I'm taking George Kittle with Trey McBride. I'll take Evan Ingram with Trey McBride. I'm also not going out of my way to force it to be like, I want to draft an elite tight end team and I'm going to take Kyle Pitts, 15 picks ahead of ADP to make it happen.
right. Well, here we are coming up in just a couple of picks. Alvin Kamara on the board. George Kittle, you said a tier break between him and Ingram. We can dive into that a little bit because I'm very bullish on George Kittle as well this year. Who jumps out to you? I feel like this is where the board gets really, really gross, and I'm not really
So
sold on anybody.
my advice would be I say we take either Lad McConkey or Keon Coleman, and then we get one of Brian Thomas or Evan Ingram with the next pick,
All right, I
and
like
kind
it.
of let it decide which Jag we do there.
Now, Lad McConkey. I'm just going to ask you because I ask a lot of people
Yeah.
this question when talking about Lad McConkey. Did you like Lad McConkey as a prospect, or do you like Lad McConkey because he's with the Chargers and they have nobody else to throw the ball to?
Yeah, I didn't like Lad McConkey as a prospect.
All right.
I think he's going to get even more expensive than he is
Yep.
right now. I do think he's going to be like an early 6th, late 5th round pick. And so I'm trying to get my shares now. Again, I'm thinking through stacking stuff. So I preferred Lad to Keon there if we were going to get in the weeds. Josh Allen's already off the board. Lad gives us
Right.
access to, again, Justin Herbert in that
Mhm.
sweet spot for quarterback. So now we got Tua, we got Herbert. And now this lines up for us to grab Evan Ingram around ADP, set up another double stack. I kind of like how that breaks.
Yeah, so we are done now with tight ends. We got Trey McBride and
Yep.
Evan Ingram. And realistically, with the way this build looks so far, we're probably going to be seeing McBride and Ingram in our flex spot in quite a few weeks. I'm liking this so far, though. Now, obviously, we're kind of going with, I don't know if you can call it hero RB, taking Kyron Williams in the second. But when do you start looking at these other running backs? Are you okay just kind of waiting until round 12, 13, 14 and just hammering running backs down the stretch, or do you like some of the mid-round guys here?
I do think coming up here is a real sweet spot.
Yep.
Obviously we have, if you look at the wide receivers right now, like Rashi Rice is sliding for obvious reasons. JSN and Christian Watson are kind of in this amorphous tier. And then you jump all the way down to almost the triple digits for
Yep.
ADP. So to me, these next couple picks generally line up in a real sweet spot to grab our running back 2, potentially our running back 3 here. And because the quarterbacks we're going to select are going to be in the subsequent rounds, like I don't think at these
Mhm.
next 2 turn picks, to me, this lines up generally speaking for 2 running backs. If we like a wide receiver faller, I think we can entertain it. But yeah, I agree with you that the way the pockets of the draft board line up, this is a running back zone coming up here.
And I'm in complete agreement with you. Not crazy about DeAndre Swift. Not sure what his usage is going to look like. I think there's a lot of talented backs in Chicago, so I've kind of been passing on him. Najee Harris, I know he burned a lot of people last year, but with now getting pushed all the way into the 8th round, I'm very much so in on him. Tony Pollard is a guy that I've been drafting a lot. When the news
Yep.
first broke that he signed with Tennessee, I said, I'm going to want nothing to do with Tony Pollard because I thought he was going to be getting drafted in the 4th, 5th round. But with him falling into round 9, I can't help myself from drafting him. Looks like we've already seen Zamir White go off the board. That was a good pick by Stephanie there. Really like Zamir White where he's getting drafted as well. But all of these guys, James Conner, Jonathan Brooks is a guy right now that I think is grossly undervalued. I think I say this all the time with these guys coming off of injuries. We see them get pushed way down draft boards. And then what happens, June, July, mini camps start rolling around. We see one video of Jonathan Brooks cutting on an open field, and he's going to shoot up 3 rounds. So I'm trying to get as much of him as I can right now. Still a few
For
picks
sure.
out, but I think this is definitely the running back sweet spot. We're going to be looking at some of these guys here. We're set on tight end. We're waiting on these quarterbacks, which are all going to make it into the later rounds for us. I think we just kind of shred running backs with these next few picks.
Yep. And the only other kind of distinction that I like to think about, I will often be in a similar spot, similar build that we have right now, but instead of the running back, I'll have the 5 wide receivers and 2 tight ends.
Right.
And what I'm looking for that first or second running back might be a little different than when I have the anchor in Kyron, because in that 0 RB build, I'm saying I need some touches. And guys like Najee or Tony Pollard, Zach Moss, those guys start to really jump out to me. When I've got Kyron, I start to be like, I really want to swing to the fences. I'm not going to need those early season touches. He's going to be getting 20 plus touches out of the gate.
Yep.
Give me the rookies. Give me the volatile guys who have a wider range of outcomes, because I know I'm not going to be starved for touches early.
And here we talked about it, Jonathan Brooks, a guy that's going well ahead of ADP, and we just saw him go off the board about a round earlier than expected. There goes Tony Pollard off the board, so my 40% exposure on Pollard will take a little bit of a dip after this draft. Who jumps out to you? I mean, I said I don't hate Najee. Do we want to go Mostert here, or do you think that's too much on the Dolphins?
It's not that it's necessarily too much. I just kind of like the value drop on Najee here. We're getting him 6 or 7 picks past ADP. I just talked about wanting to more swing for the fences, but I like being open
the
to
most vanilla running back possible here instead.
Yeah. But again, like, one of the other things I like in drafts right now are all of the late rookie values. And again, those guys are going to come with a lot of risk. Like if we wanted a target guys like Vidal and Tyrone Tracy and even guys like Bucky Irving and Ray Davis, those guys might not do much at the beginning of the season. Well, now that we have Kyron and Najee, again, we have bank touches. We can really swing for the fences with some of these other running back picks.
Now, do any of these wide receivers pique your interest? Jameson Williams, Mike Williams, Cortland Sutton. Right now, we've got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Christian Kirk, and Ladd McConkey. Probably wouldn't hurt to add a 5th, but I really like Trey Benson here if he falls to us as well. Like you said, one of those guys that can be kind of the late season hammer. I like Trey Benson. Who jumps out to you? This pick is all you.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. If Trey Benson had gone, I think I would have said, let's swing back, grab a wide receiver here, some decent vets. But I like Trey Benson. He fits kind of that criteria we were just talking about. We are going to be slightly behind the 8 ball at wide receiver, but I think we can recover. The thing to remember is we're going to be using a lot of these upcoming picks on quarterbacks. So we just need to make sure that we are building out our wide receiver crew. We might end up getting to a spot where we're attacking wide receiver with quantity. Like this might be a 9 wide receiver build just because we're not going to have as much quality at the top.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking right now with Kyron Williams, Najee Harris, and Trey Benson. We might only be adding another 1 or 2 running backs to this build. We've got a pretty solid room right here. I think Kyron Williams and Najee Harris give us a safe floor. Trey Benson, like you said, we'll look at some of the Ray Davises and other high upside rookies later in the draft. But I think now with these next few picks, now that we've just double tapped on running backs, we're probably going to change our focus to the wide receivers a little bit. But we've also got our next picks coming up here are, what are they? Picks 118 and 123. So that puts us where we're going to be looking at all 3 of these guys. We might, what would you think about double tapping quarterbacks? Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, or I don't know. Talk me through your process here, because if we double tap quarterbacks, we are way behind on wide receivers.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I'm thinking through here. And one, again, the Benson thing, just to kind of wind back the decisions that were going through my head. If we take Mike Williams, it opens up Aaron Rodgers, which is a quarterback slot that's going to come later in the draft. If we take Tyler Lockett, that's opening up potentially Geno Smith, a quarterback slot. So that was kind of my thought process, but I did really like the high upside swing. And again, to your point, this is most likely going to be a 5 running back team at most. And if we do really like an earlier running back value, we could do 4 and just stop. And then we are going to attack the hell out of these rookie wide receivers and any kind of volume merchants we can find. So sometimes you find yourself in, I don't know, slightly uncomfortable. It's not like how you would draw it
Right.
up on the board if you wrote out your perfect draft, but I don't mind it because it gets us into different spots. And the thing I always come back to is like, yes, there are sweet spots of the draft. You're trying to kind of navigate that to eke out the most value, but you can make any build work. It's again, it goes back to that thing, quantity versus quality, not both. We're not going to have super high quality wide receivers in our mid round depth. We can make up for that with quantity, and we are going to beat people at the other positions. We're going to beat you at tight end. We're going to beat you at running back. And so I think we can make this work.
And that being said, we still have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I mean, it's
Exactly.
not like we have
Yeah.
like absolute slouches at wide receivers, but I feel like I fall into this trap so much where I just say, okay, I'll just hammer wide receivers late in the draft. And then you get to round 15, 16, 17, 18, and the wide receivers are just disgusting there. So we'll see how this kind of
So,
works out for us. But here we are coming up
do,
in 2 picks. Where's your mind? I mean, I don't
I
even
was
hate
going to say,
Jameson
do we
Williams
want
here.
to entertain JMO?
That's exactly where my head
He's
was.
a faller. Is Goff, is he still on the board? Just so I know, do we have even more quarterback coverage? Goff is gone.
Looks like Goff was drafted already. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
don't hate
think
JMO here though at all. I mean, that's what we need is a high upside wide receiver for this build.
both of these other teams already have 2 quarterbacks. I do not think they're taking Tua, who's, the most important to us. I have no problem taking Jameson here and saying again, let's figure it out, or let's see if the room doesn't want to take one of these other quarterbacks without a stack. That's
And I
kind
think
of
that's one of
like
the
Darren.
best ways to look at this. A lot of people here might panic and say, I need to take Tua. But looking ahead at the board, seeing that all of the guys picking around the turn here, like you said, already have 2 quarterbacks, that means we are almost assured to get either Tua or Trevor Lawrence at pick 123, both under ADP.
Yep. Yeah. And there's, again, like the other kind of nice flexibility in this range is I think we're right on the line of it being a 2 quarterback or a 3 quarterback build. Say we
Mhm.
did double tap Tua and Trevor Lawrence there, and then Herbert goes. I think we're okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and scoop up Tua now.
Look at
I
that.
think
That just
we're okay
shows
with
kind
a
of
2
being a
quarterback.
patient drafter, like doing the right thing. I
Yep,
was talking earlier when we drafted Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, like, are we reaching for Tua with pick 109? And we ended up getting him all the way at 123 because, like you said, we kind of cornered the market on the Dolphins' passing attack.
for sure. Yeah, so that's a perfect example of kind of just knowing how these break. And again, this goes back to getting reps. And again, you don't necessarily have to get reps in a $25 contest. You can do private,
Yeah.
$3 leagues with your friends. You can do, I
Puppies.
like doing the puppies or whatever
Yeah.
because you get people have real skin in the game. They're trying to win. And then that can be your sandbox, your training ground for your higher dollar buy-ins. And then you know how to navigate these spots and you don't panic and be like, I need Tua at pick 90. It's like, no, chill out. The room will probably give him to you.
And speaking of skin in the game, if you're watching this right now, we are drafting on Underdog Fantasy. If you use promo code Football Guys, I think up in the corner there it says 100% deposit match. They just switched it. Pete, correct me if I'm wrong. They're doing a $250 deposit match now, and you get a free pick'em, I believe, right?
Yeah, so slight tweak to it. It is it's a little tricky. It is up to $250 in deposit bonus, but it's a max of it's not a direct match. It's 50% deposit match up to $250.
Gotcha. I
Yeah.
mean, it's still great. Throw
It's still good.
550 or 500
Yeah.
bucks in, you get 750. That gives you quite a few bullets into this BBM contest that we're drafting in right now. Now, Justin Herbert is a guy that we queued up. He just went off the board, so I guess it kind of ruins what I was going to talk about here. But we don't have any Chargers besides Lad McConkey. So some of the other ones, Trevor Lawrence went off the board. Goff is already off the board. Herbert's already off the board. Kyler's off the board.
Yeah.
At this point, I mean, Kyler would have been nice too because we had Trey Benson as well. But I believe Kyler's going before Trey Benson. Are we looking? I mean, I really don't like the idea of stacking Matthew Stafford with Kyron Williams. So much what Kyron does is on the ground. So I
Yeah.
feel like that's not the best stack to lay out. But who are some other guys that you'd be looking at here? It looks like we might be building some late round stacks on their own.
Yeah. It does get a little tricky in the spot and maybe even tab off of tight end just because we know we're done there. But I think there's a few different things we can do here. I'm not maybe quite as opposed to Stafford as you, just because
All
like
right.
I'm always trying to get that team correlation. Like the way I think about it, I understand it's like, okay, how much is Stafford going to be throwing, Kyren passes? But it's like what the way I think of correlation is like, if the Rams are a top 5 offense this year, aren't both Matthew Stafford and Kyren going to roll? In maybe one game, Stafford throws 4 touchdown passes. Maybe
Right.
the next week, Kyren has 2 goal line touchdowns. And so, like, I think we can reap the benefits there. But we are kind of running out of like clean stacks, right? Really clean
Right.
ones.
And I mean,
Go
that
over to,
it also opens up Demarcus Robinson for us
yes,
in the final round, which I don't dislike at all. I think that he's going to be just fine this year if you've got Stafford. What is it that you want me to pull up?
just the full quarterback list so I can kind of think of what other quarterback stacks we could do. See, the reason this makes it tricky is a lot of these guys that you would backdoor stack, it's like with their tight end. It's like
Right.
Rodgers, oh, we'll toss Conklin on. Baker Mayfield will toss Otten on. Stuff like that.
So I know you said
All
you
of the
don't like Watson. I've really liked doing the Watson Judy backdoor stack.
Yeah. It's more I just don't I actually like Judy a lot. I just
Right.
don't like Deshaun Watson.
Fair enough.
The
Are
other
we
thing
going
we could
Stafford here?
do,
Or do we want to wait and try to get Stafford with the next pick? Again,
let's
everybody around
wait.
the turn has 2 quarterbacks. So we're probably looking wide receiver here,
I love
Dontavian
Wicks,
Wicks.
man.
All
I
right,
love
let's do
Wicks.
it.
This would also be another example. So there's a couple ways we could go here. I think we could like potentially take our last running back. I love both of the rookies here. The other thing would be again getting another stack without the quarterback. I'm not a Quentin Johnston guy. I think he flopped.
Yeah.
But if we take Quentin Johnston and Ladd and basically say, yeah, we got sniped on
One of
Herbert.
these guys is going to hit.
Yeah, we're still building out a stack, which just not with the quarterback. I'm not opposed to that either. But we do need to consider our other quarterback options. I'm not opposed to doing something funky at the end of the draft. Maybe we get Justin Fields with Najee.
Ooh.
I don't know. I think you can
So no
sell me on
Stafford here.
Stafford, Wright, or QJ here. I'm going to let you pick either of those 3. I think we can make it work.
See, I would have liked Marshawn Lloyd to kind of
Yeah.
pair up with the Dontavian Wicks pick that we just made, but I think we go Stafford here, and then we just call it a day for quarterbacks. We're going to be looking exclusively
Yeah.
at wide receivers and running backs for the rest of the draft. I do like, now we've got Matthew Stafford, we've got Kyren Williams, and then, like I said, we'll keep an eye on Demarcus Robinson in round 18. But we're set at quarterback, we're set at tight end. Maybe add, 1 or 2 more running backs here, but I think we're just going to be looking at wide receivers for the rest of this draft.
Yes, I agree. I think that was the cleanest way to finish us off at quarterback without us getting really creative. The thing I think about for some of these late round quarterback spots is there are guys I like Justin Fields has a ton of upside if he plays. Drake
If he
May
plays.
has a ton of upside if he plays. Obviously, the if there is important. And one of the downsides of drafting early is we are at an information disadvantage. Drake May could start week 1. They could also start Jacoby Brissett till week 12. Neither of those things would shock me. I don't want to take on that risk right now if I don't have to. Same with Justin Fields. We could find out he's in a camp battle and wins the job. Is that the most likely? Probably not, but that's possible. And so I want to make those decisions in August when we get way more information. So let's swerve those. I think you were smart to push us to Matthew Stafford. We have 2 quarterbacks we know are going to start the whole season. We can take on risk in other spots.
And the thing is, and this is probably like a psychological way that I'm probably playing at I'm hurting myself. Like in a $3 puppy, I'm willing to take the risk on Justin Fields and Drake May. But the reality is you should probably be taking those risks in this draft where, if a report comes out in August that Justin Fields has won the starting spot and he's going to be starting ahead of Russell Wilson, then all of a sudden he's getting drafted in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. Right now, you can get him in round 18. And of course, like you said, the risk is that he doesn't play at all. And the same thing with Drake May. So that just kind of opens a huge can of worms into kind of talking about this a little bit. Like, how much risk are you willing to take? Because it could pay off, or you could just be lighting a $25 entry on fire.
Exactly. And I think, again, one of the things that's really been driven into my head from Mike Leone's manifesto was one of the best things. Like, we do all of these things to increase our chances of winning. We stack, we get ADP values, but literally the most important thing is when you show up in the finals of these contests, how many live players do you have? How many players do you have that aren't injured and aren't buried on the bench? And just having live players is the most important thing. And so it's easier to avoid dead roster spots when we draft in August. We have so much information. We know that Tim Patrick got hurt. We're not having to draft him. So if we can avoid the things that are on the fringe of potentially being a dead roster spot or not contributing any points to our team, then we need to do that to the best of our ability. And that's why it can get tricky kind of early on. And so I like being an aggressive drafter. I want to draft profiles with upside, but I also don't want to be reckless. I think you can target upside without being reckless.
Completely agree. Now, at this point, we're only looking at running backs and wide receivers. We've closed out our
Yeah.
quarterback room. Would you have any interest in adding a third quarterback here, or you think we're good? Like if Troy Franklin falls, are you thinking like Franklin and Bo Nix as like a really dirty backdoor stack?
I think that would be open to it. And it dovetails with what we're just talking about. I like both Troy Franklin and Jalen
And
Polk
Jalen Polk.
here.
Yep.
But we know, like, I would break the tie in favor of Troy Franklin in this case. One, he's a huge ADP value. And two, because I feel more confident about Bo Nix starting week 1 than I do Drake May. And so that would
Absolutely.
maybe in this spot where we want to entertain a third quarterback, just use that as a soft tiebreaker to the other guy.
So Troy Franklin is a guy that I think you and I both like here if he falls to us. If not, are we going down to Malachi Corley, Marvin Mims? What do you think is the move if Franklin's off the board?
Yeah, it's a good call. We could do Mims with the same thesis. One
Right.
really interesting thing, Franklin's there. I thought he was overvalued right after the draft. I think now getting in this price range, I think it's perfectly fine. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he just fell over a round behind ADP. And I'm
Mhm.
okay. Again, trying to read the tea leaves of what's going to happen in the offseason is a dangerous game, but we've heard a lot about Cortland Sutton being on the trade block. And this is one of those instances like if Cortland Sutton does get traded, then all of a sudden we're looking at Troy Franklin probably moving inside round 10. And again, we've seen a lot of teams kind of following this blueprint over the years where they take a young rookie quarterback and pair him up with his favorite weapon from college. And it's worked. So Troy Franklin, it's impossible to ignore the slide in the draft and where he went. But I'm okay taking the risk, especially with the wide receiver room that we have right now, where we do need to swing for the fences somewhat with these picks.
Yeah, I kind of like the spot we're in right now.
It'd be
It's a
crazy to
little
go
bit of
Mims
a
here.
it was funny. I was gonna say I think we should go Mims
Yep.
priority or the 3 guys I was gonna float. I do like Luke McCaffrey, but if we want to get another running back and correlation, Jaleel McLaughlin could be an option. Um,
Yeah. I love that pick. Dobbins is a guy, man. I want to. I want to buy back in again, but it's been rough these last couple of years. And now coming off another Achilles injury, not buying into that too much. So I think McLaughlin makes a lot of sense. And
yeah.
the other fear, like you said, we don't have all the information right now. Um, when the schedule comes out, if we knew that the Dolphins and Rams, let's just hypothetically say they have the same bye week, would you be avoiding that, or do you not really care too much about that? Are you willing to draft and stack 2 teams that have the same bye week? Because I feel like that's another thing at this point in the season without knowing bye weeks, that it does make sense to have 3 quarterbacks or 3 tight ends just to avoid that possibility.
Yeah, I think I the way I think about it, I'm not opposed to having 2 tight ends with the same bye week. 2 quarterbacks is I generally draw the line.
Because
I
then you're
think I did
losing
it
out on
maybe
20, 25 points.
exactly. I think I did it like once last year where the guy slid like 4 rounds past ADP and I was like, "You know what? The value here is worth it to offset that." But yeah, guys like Neil Farley, who does great data research for Best Ball Mania in these contests, he showed that the same buy stuff like legitimately impacts your win rate,
Mhm.
and we kind of forget like how close the margins are from advancing a third place team to a second place team. And sure, could you get away with it on a team where you just got everything right and you can sacrifice those points? Sure. But if you're drafting a ton of these teams and continually doing that, that loss in value is going to add up and probably reduce the number of teams you get through.
Yeah. So I basically what we're saying is we're okay, even though we already have Tua and Stafford, which assuming they didn't have correlating bye weeks, we'd feel pretty good about that quarterback room. But now that we've opened up this Denver stack possibility with Jaleel McLaughlin and with Troy Franklin, throwing a 17th round pick at Bo Nix doesn't really hurt us. If anything, it could help us.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I often will call this selection like a luxury pick because we would be fine if we wanted to go with 2 QBs. If I thought there was a huge opportunity cost of like, man, there's this great value or a big sleeper running back that really gives this room some extra upside, let's not force it. But one of the things we're also going to find is a lot of the intriguing part of the player pool is getting thinned out.
Mhm.
At this point, most of the trendy rookies are gone. If we want to reverse engineer our draft for these last 3 picks, we know Demarcus Robinson is a target for us. Bo Nix could be a target for us. There's still a couple rookies on the board that I'm kind of interested in.
I like Javon Baker, but
Yeah.
you know, I don't think we have. Uh, Personally, I'm not taking Javon Baker here because then that just kind of blows everything that we did with trying to set up for this late round Bo Nix pick.
Exactly. Yeah. Devontae Walker, not a guy I don't mind throwing a dart on if you're just trying to get a little rookie upside. We could even have the Odell conversation, triple stack Tua.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't hurt.
He's basically Demarcus Robinson on Miami, depending on what you feel about Malik Washington.
Yeah, I don't dislike it. You think we're good on running backs where we're at right now? It's I wouldn't say shaky, but this is. I feel like when you have Kyron Williams, Najee Harris, Trey Benson, Jaleel McLaughlin, you could add a 5th, but I think we
Yeah.
might also be okay with 4. We got to remember we got 3 picks left. Planning on using one of these on a quarterback as well. So do we want to go with 2 more wide receivers and a quarterback, or do we want to go with a wide receiver, running back, and a quarterback?
The problem here is I do think in a perfect world structurally we would get a 5th running back. The question is there a 5th running back that we would even want or like? Will you go over to the tab here?
I like Keaton Mitchell a lot.
Yeah.
If he can come back from that, and
he
he just
goes.
went off the board. So there he goes.
So
Audric
the
Estime.
the only other guy I still don't mind Dylan Laube here. I think he has a nice spot on that depth chart. And I actually think he's kind of similar to Jaleel McLaughlin, not in their exact profile, in that they're going to have a role. Like Audric Estime, he's going to be blocked behind Javonte as like more of the pure rusher. Yeah. But like Dylan Laube, he's going to be their pass catching back. And then there's a little room for more. So I would lock up Robinson here, though. Odell goes off the board. So I was always going to only want to get one wide receiver. We get the stack here with Stafford.
Yeah, I like that. And we've also got to remember we got Kyron Williams as well. So we've invested quite a bit in the Rams offense. I like the way that kind of fell to us. With this next pick, 195, we're probably going to be looking. I mean, I know you said Dylan Laube is a guy that jumps out to you. Let's look at the wide receivers here. Javon Baker, Demario Douglas, Devontae Walker, Tyler Boyd. We'll see how his ADP moves. If anything, I'd expect it to drop. I like the possibility that he'd land in a better landing spot. Not crazy about him being the wide receiver 3 for Will Levis. Malik Washington is another guy. I know we wanted Odell. I don't know how you feel about Malik Washington, but I feel like he really fits in with what the Dolphins are trying to do. He's a guy who can do a lot after the catch. I think they're going to be manufacturing him on a lot of short routes just to get the ball in his hand and let him do things after the catch. So since we missed out on Odell, I'm okay taking Malik Washington. I mean, we got 2 picks left, and if we could finish this draft with Bo Nix and Malik Washington, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Yeah, it's tricky here. What should we let Bo Nix go, or do you and get one running back, one wide receiver? I think this is a really close call as far as how we allocate these last.
I'll defer to you. 10 seconds left. Who would you like to take?
Let's get up to that 9th wide receiver. Let's get Malik Washington first. I know he has.
Then that gives us about
ADP.
8 minutes to discuss this last pick here because we've painted ourselves into a corner. I'm not crazy about 4 running backs here. I think it does make sense to add a 4th. I do like the idea of having a 3rd quarterback as well. And we have set ourselves up for Nix to fit nicely into this build. But you know, when you go 9 wide receivers, that's going to leave you pretty thin at some other positions.
Yeah. And like there's a couple ways to think about this, right? There's optimal roster construction, like on the one hand, and building up resiliency at all positions. But there's also this idea of drafting like we're right. We don't want to do it in a reckless way. But one thing that I like to do as like a thought exercise is for this team to work, right? Like one of Najee, Trey Benson, and McLaughlin have to be like a massive win at running back, like smash their ADP. So let's just play out a scenario. Let's say James Conner tears his ACL in the preseason. Again, not wishing this to happen, but Trey Benson is the starter. We're probably getting like 3rd round value on Trey Benson. So I like thinking through the scenarios of like, or let's just say he outplays Connor and wins the job. Or let's say, Arthur Smith doesn't want to use Jalen Ward and Najee Harris is just like Joe Mixon, but in the 10th round instead of the 5th. So like thinking through how are the ways this team can win? Whereas say we did start a draft with 3 running backs through 6 rounds, we probably would only have taken a 4th anyways. So it's like, can we realistically tell ourselves a story where these are like a hyper fragile build where we're getting increased values? I do think it's a little bit of a stretch with these guys. And I do lean with you to wanting that 5th running back. I think it's more important to this team than the 3rd running back or quarterback, especially because Bo Nix isn't going to be a guy who gives us that Konami code with rushing.
Absolutely.
It would just be for the stack.
Right. So let's look through the running backs here. I know you said you really like Dylan Lobby. Let me just go ahead and rattle off some of the other names here. Audric Estime, we've already got Jaleel McLaughlin, so we're probably not going there. Tank Bigsby is a guy that I have been drafting and not feeling great about. But at the end of the day, he's an injury away from being the guy on a Jacksonville Jaguars offense that was pretty potent last year. And we've also got Christian Kirk, and we have Evan Ingram. So that kind of opens us up to maybe drafting him as well. Braylon Allen, I'm completely out on him. I don't know your thoughts on Braylon Allen. Deonta Foreman is another guy I've been drafting late. But again, we've already got a lot of the early season production built in with Kyren Williams and Najee Harris. And I think that's what you're getting from Deonta Foreman. So I like drafting him late when I've already gone heavy on rookies and the guys that can have the late season production, knowing that Deonta Foreman is probably going to be the guy until Nick Chubb comes back. Evan Hull, another injury away guy. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, not too interested in him. For me, it is Laube and Bigsby are the guys that jump out. Bigsby fits in with the correlation with the Jaguars that we already have. Laube is probably just a better all-around player. So which way would you lean here?
Yeah, I agree pretty much with all of your thoughts there. I think I would. It's close, right? Because the contingent upside for Tank is pretty big. Laube, I just feel better about like getting on the field and having a role. But again, his impact might be stronger in PPR leagues. Maybe he's, way more gimmicky, not giving us quite as many explosive plays. He was not an explosive rusher. What you're getting excited about was all of the receptions. Let's go Tank. I think the correlation thesis, along with the kind of contingent upside, like you said, this team isn't going to sink early because we have a lot of touches. If something happens to James Conner, to Travis Etienne, to Javonte Williams, we're probably going to have a back we feel really good about.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. And don't get me wrong, Tank Bigsby was flat out terrible last year. Like I'm not sitting here saying Tank Bigsby was a good player solely for the contingent upside. Who else do they still have there? Is it Dearness Johnson?
I think
is
it's Dearness,
running back? Yeah. So Bigsby probably gets some work. And thank you, DC Fantasy, for making the choice for us. He took Laube at 18-9. So that leaves us with Bigsby here. How do you feel about this one, Pete? I'm going to give us a C+. Not my favorite build that I've done. Not my favorite build that I've done, but also not the worst that I've done.
Yeah, I think I would be a little more generous with my grading than that. I would give this a solid B.
All right.
One thing, I streamed all 150 of my Best Ball Mania drafts last year, and one of the benefits of that was I drafted with a lot of different people, and I had a really diverse portfolio. My friend Pat Carrain over on his site, Legendary Upside, they actually created a way to kind of quantify how diverse your portfolio was. Because the thought being, a lot of times when you draft on your own, just kind of on autopilot, you're clicking the same guys, you're making accidental stands. Like you're pairing guys together that you didn't even realize you're always pairing them together. So for some reason, I like the challenge of like, let me try to put myself in a straitjacket and see if I can get out. Let me go down a different part of the ADP draft board and see how my team looks. Like, cause I'm more confident that I can land the plane, that I can wiggle out of it. So I always enjoy the challenge. Sometimes you get fully boxed out and it feels gross. I didn't feel like we got fully boxed out. I thought there were, like, if we go back through and say, like, what would we do differently? I don't know if there's a ton that I'd want to do differently. Maybe we don't force. One of the main things I would say, that's the tough part about double elite tight end, is you remove options from the player pool to make other things work. We were talking about how those back stacks with other quarterbacks become a lot easier when you can grab Jawan Johnson with Derek Carr and Cade Otton with Baker Mayfield. That removed that option. So we had less optionality late. That's, I think, where we felt constricted. But other than
But it
that,
feels
I
good
think we
at the
did good.
time when you take,
Yeah.
a second top 6, top 7 tight end, it feels really good, but then, like you said, you kinda feel gross down the stretch, and like you said, kinda get yourself out of your comfort zone, I think is an important part, especially when you're volume drafting, and that's something James Brimacone and I, we did a show together a couple of years ago, and what we would do is we would run a poll on Twitter saying, "How do you wanna see us draft today? Do you wanna see us go 3 quarterbacks late? Do you wanna see us go 0 running back, 0 wide receiver?"
Yeah.
And regardless of how the board fell to us, we would force ourselves to draft with a certain method just to get out of our comfort zone and draft some players that we wouldn't normally draft. And the teams sucked. I don't think we won any money, but it was a fun thought exercise and made for some pretty good content. All right, looking back at this team, I will upgrade us to a B. I think C
There you
plus
go.
was a little bit harsh. This is a fun team here. It's got a lot of ways where it can break with high upside. I think that's exactly what you're looking for when you're drafting in a team like this. But Pete, any other closing thoughts that you'd like to add to kind of round out this show here?
No, I mean, I will just kind of plug and tie it into something we did. I just have a new video out today looking at, how you should stack specifically in Best Ball Mania because of the top heavy prizes. And in
Mhm.
previous years, it was always you got to prioritize week 17. All the money went to first place. So you had to kind of reverse engineer your draft and say, I want to get some stacks. I even want to get a game stack. Obviously, we don't have the schedule right now, so we can't do the game stack. But one of the things that's like really crystallized with me as I look at which week's most important, how do you advance through this structure while still having a strong week 17 team is stacking, even without the quarterback, is like one of the most important and valuable things we can do that doesn't hurt our team at any other point. Like stacking is good in the regular season. It's good in week 15, it's 16, and it doesn't have to be with the quarterback. So I loved that we built out a Denver stack without Bo Nix. We built out a Jag stack without Trevor Lawrence while still getting a Ram stack, while still getting a Miami stack. And it's the basic concept of we're trying to reduce the number of things we have to get right. Could we have just put together the 4 offenses that surprise people this year and it all comes together in a perfect storm? We didn't have to get 18 uncorrelated things right. We were essentially trying to get 4 things right. And I think that is the way to kind of have your cake and eat it too. Build strong regular season teams that also have the variance that can vault you to the top of the pods through the playoffs.
Awesome closing thoughts there. Be sure to follow Pete on Twitter at Pete Overzet. Pete, what's the YouTube channel? I'm sure anybody watching this show probably already subscribes, but let them know where they can find all of your content. You do a lot of solo content that's great, funny, thought provoking, but you also have some awesome guests on that channel as well. So let people know where they can subscribe there.
Yeah, I got basically kind of 3 different spots if you want to get best ball content for me. I write a lot of pieces over on Fantasy Life. I actually had
Mhm.
one up this week looking at bankroll management. Underdog's going to have a ton of contests this year, and it might be hard to know how do I allocate my bankroll management. I kind of did a mock budget if you had $500 to draft with for the summer, how I would allocate those. And I do recommend, I think what you do, Dave, getting people in, doing those private leagues just to get their feel for the waters is a really smart thing to do. And then I have basically 2 different YouTube channels, one for live streams. I do a big Best Ball Mania streaming block on Mondays on my channel, Peter Overzet YouTube channel. And then I have this new channel called the Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel where I'm doing pre-recorded, highly produced strategy videos, no fluff, no wasting your time, and have all kinds of kind of insights there that are evergreen. So you can kind of circle back and hopefully build up a nice library of best ball knowledge.
Awesome. Well, be sure to check all that out if you haven't already. We will be back next week with Justin Herzig, who, Pete, you can attest to this, maybe the best ball player on the planet. I mean, he knows what he's doing. 4 straight years in the BBM finals. He took down one of the BBMs himself. So we will be back same time next week, Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you.